All right, hey, my name's Sebastian Maniak. I'm an entrepreneur, consultant, advisor. I actually own a couple companies, S144 Inc., where we do consulting services, Maniak Ventures, and a new company recently that we launched was Crypto ATM Bank of Canada. And I'm also a professor at Sheridan College teaching applied network securities itself. So what I wanted to talk about is really in the security space and how are we using some of the HashiCorp tools, specifically kind of cybersecurity mesh. So right now, ranked number one on the Gartner's top security and risk management trend of 2001 is this thing called cybersecurity mesh. You guys seeing my screen move here? Oh, it's a little delayed. What is a cybersecurity mesh? Well, it's machine authentication and authorization. It's machine-to-machine access. It's human authentication and authorization. And of course, what I want to talk about is human-to-machine access itself, right? Identity really is the core of zero trust. And I got this off the HashiCorp site. In order to verify everything, the core building blocks for this is going to be identity. Everything that we're going to do is centered around machine identity or human identity. When I refer to human identity, I welcome my linebacker, which I call boundary. My linebacker, boundary, just like a linebacker, are members of the defensive team. Linebackers are most versatile players really on the defensive side. They're defensive linemen and defensive back. So in my view, boundary is really defense and boundary is versatile. For my company, it actually provides a secure way to access our hosts, our EC2 instances, and our critical systems without having to manage credentials or exposing our networks. With boundary, we actually eliminate the use of VPNs, so our consultants and our contractors don't have to VPN a network. They just use boundary to connect to our instances. It provides this intelligent proxy that creates a granular identity-based access control for dynamic infrastructure. And the workflow layers security controls and integration at multiple levels to help us monitor and manage user access. So when we started our company, Crypto ATM of Bank of Canada, we started using Boundary to provide access to our consultants, right? Boundary kind of provided us this simple way to verify users, to have secure access to our EC2 instances without exposing our network. It helped us build this open source workflow, really that just enables us just-in-time role-based access for dynamic infrastructure. Right. When we deployed Boundary with Vault, we wanted to make sure it's easy for us to manage onboarding and offboarding users. On a typical week, we have maybe 3 to 4 or 5 different consultants join and leave to perform small little tasks. So we integrated with Azure AD so we can provide this easy onboarding when those consultants require access to our servers. We started actually using Boundary with 4.0 when they added Vault integration for brokering of Vault secrets, right, to the Boundary client via either the command line or the desktop. So our consultants have the capability of using whatever machine they want, as long as they have access to a command line, or they can download the desktop client. They can connect to any of the EC2 instances that we have deployed for them. So let's quickly talk about, or a high-level perspective of the Boundary architecture. The Boundary architecture consists of these controllers that you'll be deploying, Postgres database, your KMS to store your root and recovery keys, and these workers. So when we deploy workers in production, we actually split them across availability sets. And I just want to credit Joe because I actually stole this picture from him. I really liked it. It was very simple. These Boundary workers really just make a proxy connection to our targets, either be in AWS, in Azure, but they're able to SSH. We can do HTTP curl commands through them. We could RDP. We can connect to our Postgres databases. And for the human or the user to interact with these targets, they can use the GUI, which I'll show you guys, and the CLI to really proxy into those EC2 instances. Right? So from a demo perspective, I kind of built this demo out using the HashiCorp reference architecture in kind of this repo below. But really, we have 3 controllers spread across 3 availability zones. And then we have 3 workers. We have an ALB configured that's managing the controllers to load balance us to the appropriate one for persistence. Then we have our targets, our EC2 instances. In this case, we built 2 for this lab that allows our client, our human, to connect. And then we also deployed Vault because we wanted to do credential brokering. All right. So let's take a quick look. Let me share my other screen here. And click this demo. All right, share. So I think I should be sharing that. Perfect. So in my web browser, just wanted to quickly show you some things that we deployed. So here is our demo environment deployed in AWS. We have our controller. We have our target hosts, target host 1, 2, 3. We have Vault deployed. We have another controller and a worker. This is the worker that's going to proxy the connections on here. We could tell that these target machines, they don't have public IP addresses. They're all private. We keep them private. We don't want anybody to log into them until they're actually authenticated through through Boundary itself. Right. So let's take a look. This is, once we deploy it, we have our load balancer here, or a URL that connects us to Boundary. We can just log in. And here we have our Boundary admin GUI interface. In here, we have different projects. So just for this example, I have a core project, just core infrastructure with a set of users, in this case, just an admin user and authentication methods. Just for this demo, I have literally just a password authentication method, which I'll show you how it's done, authenticate through the CLI. When I click on projects, I have my core infrastructure and I have my sessions. So these are existing or terminated sessions that logs for any user that's logged into. We have our host catalogs. So a host catalog is really a collection of hosts or host sets. So for example, I have a host set or a host catalog of AWS servers. I can click on that, and under host sets, I see 2 of my Linux servers that have their ID, and they actually have the private IP addresses in here, as you can see. Once we have host sets, we have targets, and these are really just like our Linux servers or our F5 machines maybe, or whatever devices we have in the cloud. We can click on that and we can see we have the actual target ID, what the source IP address is. If I scroll down here, where is it? And then what we also have is this credential source. So because we're using Vault to provide our credentials, we've configured Vault here with our Vault address, our token, which is already, it's gone here, and a library that's associated with that host catalog or those targets itself. So let me jump on my other screen and I'll show you how we authenticate through the command line. Perfect. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. So because it's a lab, what we all want to do is kind of just show you the process of how we authenticate through the CLI. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to export my Boundary address. So my Boundary client that I have on this machine can talk to my controller. Then once I'm connected, I actually can figure out a method. So when I give access to some of our consultants to be able to connect to Boundary to manage some EC2 instances, they have either the desktop app or the web client. They can actually just list all the methods they're allowed. So if this user, okay, I'm allowed this method, here's my ID. So now I'm going to authenticate. I have a simple kind of password in here. So I'm just going to paste this where I'm doing Boundary authenticate. I have my login name, little password, and here's the authentication method ID. If I'm using OICD, right, Azure AD is going to pop up and I'm going to authenticate that way. So let's log in. So now we have successfully authenticated to our controller, to our boundary system. We want to make sure we take a look at maybe some of our scopes, right? So here's a scope. So what is a scope? Well, you know, scopes are really the foundation part of Foundry. They allow users to really partition resources and assign ownership of a resource to principals, right? And there's really three types of of scopes. We have a global one, organization one, or project scope itself. So if we take a look at our scopes, so let's go boundary, scopes, list, scope ID. And we take our ID here, we're going to go equals and paste it. We have that project. So in the GUI, when we saw the project, core infrastructure, and this was the ID itself. Now I could take a look at, as the consultant, well, what kind of access do I have? I've authenticated through Azure, and now I want to understand what targets, you know, the person let me into. So let's go boundary targets, list, scope ID equals, and then I'm going to paste this command. So right now I see a lot of things. I'm the admin, so I do have a lot of actions to be able to perform on this project. But I see my target ID and my Linux servers, and then I have my Vault server itself here. So I'm just going to copy this, and I want to SSH into this device. If I have Boundary installed, I can just use Boundary Connect to SSH into it. So pretty simple. If I do Boundary Connect, SSH, I'm going to do username, Ubuntu, and my target ID equals, I'm going to paste that out. Oops, I spelled target wrong. Target ID. Boom. So what happened now was that I trying to connect to this host, but because I have Vault credentials configured or Vault brokering, it actually spits out the secret, right? So in the current version of Vault, it doesn't do this automatically for static secrets, but for dynamic secrets, you have the capability of automatically getting the password pushed in here. But right now, for just static secrets, it gives me the data and the password itself, where I can paste it, so I don't ever have to remember this password for this EC2 instance, and then I'm able to log in to my host, manage it without a VPN. So I'm being really proxied directly through the worker into this host itself. So exit. As an administrator, right, I can also look at my sessions. So if I do show my sessions, it will show me all the sessions that I've had before, that I've done for this machine. If I want to see, let's take a look at the red session. So if we want to get more detail on specific sessions, we can read this user ID in here, and we can understand, oh, you know, this consultant, right, logged here, disconnected here, logged in here, disconnected here. We have a full trail of when that user and that token and that access was allowed and used itself. So next thing, what I'm going to show, hopefully, let's see if this works, if I can share my desktop. Well, that might be too big. I'm going to show you guys the actual app. So where's my Boundary app? This is perfect. So this is the desktop application that some of my users can download. Really, they download this app. It works on Windows, Mac, and Linux. They're going to select the organization that we have deployed. So in this demo, it's just called Maniak Academy. I'm going to put in my password. So I'm authenticating to the controller, and it's giving me a list of all the targets. So it knows that I have access to this Vault server, I have access to this Linux server. If I don't want to install the boundaries commands, I can use this GUI to connect, and using whatever tools I have. So in this case, I'm using a Mac, so I can use SSH. So let's see if this, I'm going to show this up, but let's just click on connect. So I'm going to connect to this Linux server inside of the app. It gives me an actual proxy URL and a port to connect to. And then if I just look at the raw data, it actually it went to Vault and grabbed the grid. So password is happy hacking. So we know the port is 5252765. So if I switch over to my command line, and if you're using PowerShell or curl or putty, you can actually use those tools itself to be able to connect. So I'm just going to share my other screen here. Yes, perfect. So now that I've connected on that port, literally I can use the SSH command, -port 5275. Ubuntu is my username, 17001. Yes, I want to connect to, put in my password that I pasted from the app. And I'm able to proxy right into my environment. So let me exit that, and we'll take a look at how we actually configured this. So let me open up Visual Code. And everything we deployed here in this lab is deployed, wrong screen, is deployed in my repo. So anybody can take a look at the code itself. Here we go. It's not too complicated, but really we have our AWS infrastructure, we have an Azure infrastructure, GCP infrastructure, and then we have our boundary configuration. If we take a look at exactly what we just deployed here, we have our host catalog, which was AWS. We have our Linux servers. Those are just the private IP addresses for this demo. We have our host set that matches those host IDs. And here we have our temporary that we deployed for this demo, where we're grabbing credentials. So we created a special token and a policy in Vault to do this. And also we created that credential library where we're doing a path to Infradata AWS. So this is how, we as a company really are using Vault and Boundary to provide access to our consultants, and without the need of a VPN or even managing a VPN itself. I don't know if anybody had any questions, but that was the end of my presentation, just to demo out Boundary.
Awesome. Thank you so much for giving the presentation. I don't think we have time right now to do Q&A, but we really appreciate you coming on and sharing today. And I didn't actually see if there's any questions in chat right now in YouTube, but if there is, feel free to respond to them there.